Rick Sanchez isn't just the smartest man in the multiverse, he's also the most dangerous. In his hands, everything is a weapon, and seemingly innocuous inventions often pose a terrible threat to those around him. Sometimes these inventions jeopardize Morty, other times his family, Earth, or the entire multiverse. Rick's inventions are often as absurd as they are dangerous, pushing his scientific mind to its limits for no other reason than to prove that he can. Some have demonstrated their lethality by racking up a staggering body count, while the lethal potential to others is latent, ticking away like a bomb just out of sight. Now I want to talk about the most famous and interesting inventions of his, by starting with his space cruiser. It made his debut in the pilot episode of Rick and Morty and was the first invention of Rick's that we saw in the series. It appears almost in every single episode and is an integral part of the series. The space cruiser is an interdisciplinary vehicle designed and built by Rick with the aim of making space travel an easier and faster task for him. In the pilot, Rick said that he built it out of stuff he found in the garage. However, in Rick Mirai Jack, it is shown that Rick created the spaceship in his youth, and in the episode of him as a kid, we can see blueprints of his ship, which means that he had an idea of creating his ship before, which means that he had the idea of creating his ship farm before he went back to the Smith family. The cruiser overcomes the interstellar spaces in such a short time, apparently due to the work of the warp engine, which is also used by other higher alien species in their space transport. The ship has a lot of abilities such as disintegrator gun, grow ray, laser minigun, 2 built-in mops, control chip, 2 frontal flamethrowers, underside gunner, and more. It is truly one of the most overpowered tools in Rick's arsenal. Another overpowered invention of Rick's that also appeared in the pilot episode was the neutrino bomb, which presumably radiates lethal amounts of neutrinos when detonated. Because neutrinos can pass through matter almost unimpeded, a sufficient intensity of neutrinos will travel through the Earth and deliver a lethal dose to the entire population in a fraction of a second. In a drunken stupor, Rick planned to launch this bomb from his ship, intending to spare only himself, Morty, and Morty's crush, Jessica. The bomb is shown arming itself, but it is not known whether it detonates or not. In The Vindicators 3, The Return of World Ender, it is revealed that Rick's neutrino bombs have a 40% chance to be duds, and that Morty has disarmed several during Rick's drunken escapades. I always wondered what happened to the first neutrino bomb in the pilot episode. We can assume that it did not activate since Rick and Morty are alive, but given the show's popular theme of multiple dimensions, I wouldn't be surprised if the first Rick and Morty were different from Morty Prime and Rick C-137. It would also explain the weird continuity error with Rick's spaceship. If we're talking about iconic inventions, we must not forget Rick's portal gun, which is a gadget that allows the user to travel between different universes, dimensions, and realities. The device was likely created by a Rick, although it is unknown which one. Rick Mirai Jack confirms that Rick C-137 was not the original inventor of the portal gun in the multiverse, due to the fact that he was the earliest known Rick to possess the portal gun and his enticing of Rick C-137 to possess it in the fabricated memory. It is highly likely that the original inventor of the portal gun was Rick Prime. The earliest observed instance of the gun is during a memory, depicting Rick in his home dimension tinkering with the concept of teleportation, extracted by federal agent Cornelius Daniel while Rick was willfully imprisoned. It shows a bulky, handheld prototype device seemingly edging on the capabilities of practical interspatial teleportation, though Rick C-137 is shown clearly having difficulty getting it fully operational. After failing to work out errors inherent to his invention, an interdimensional version of himself traveled to his garage, hoping to implore him to shift his focus into traveling between realities instead, eventually alluding to a thinly veiled reference of the central finite curve's existence in the process. It's unclear how exactly the portal gun is controlled. Rick at multiple times can be seen instantly reconfiguring it as he sees fit without any visible action or effort, so it might be controlled telepathically. However, Morty has to manually adjust its controls on the handle to tune it to select an exit destination. The portals work in both directions until the portal collapses, which takes varying amounts of time, presumably regulated by the user. Portals can be created under any angle, not just vertically, across a solid surface or in thin air. Portals are opaque, and the user cannot see the other side until they actually enter, as seen with the Blender Dimension portal. Larger devices of similar design are used on the Citadel, either as portals to transport large objects, like trash, or to teleport the entire Citadel if needed without creating an actual portal. Gaseous compounds cannot enter through the portals, as stated by Rick, which prevented them from escaping with fart. I don't want to talk more about the portal gun because there is so much to cover and I plan on doing a separate video on that one, so stay tuned for it. The portal gun isn't the only gun that caught my interest. Antimatter is also an equally interesting tool in my opinion. This is a small handheld device. This little gun may not necessarily be able to destroy the entire world at once, but it can probably help its user by getting close to doing it. As part of a shady arms dealer with Crumbopulous Michael, Rick creates a nifty gun that is able to fire off antimatter, i.e. it is able to destroy all forms of matter. Given that this thing can unalive an otherwise omnipotent all-powerful being, suffice it to say it can probably do a whole lot more damage across the multiverse. Being able to kill and destroy literally anything is kind of a big deal. Now that we're talking about iconic inventions, we shouldn't forget interdimensional TV cable either. This invention is so great that the writers of Rick and Morty squeezed 2 whole episodes out of it. In the first season, Rick's Minutes introduced us to an alternate reality in which Jerry is a movie star, a version of Game of Thrones where Tyrion is mocked for being taller than everyone else, and an appliance salesman named Ants in My Eyes Johnson. In the second season, Interdimensional Cable 2 Tempting Fate showed us conjoined aliens who host rivaling TV shows, a game show that teleports random people into dangerous situations, and an action movie about a dystopian future populated with clones of Jan Michael Vincent. Another interesting tool that was shown in the first episode was the freeze ray. In the first episode, Frank Palicki was killed when Rick froze him with the ray and he subsequently shattered when he was tipped over. This tool made a reappearance several times. For example, it can be seen in Rick's lab coat in Lawnmower Dog. It was also shown in the beginning of Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind when one of the Ricks had to neutralize the Jerry. Jerry was unfrozen when Rick requested that they at least unfreeze his daughter's idiot. It is used again by a Rick in the Rick Champ Redemption to freeze C-137's versions of Beth, Jerry, and Summer. Rick also used it on Ned Flanders in The Simpsons and the Rick and Morty crossover couch gag. The freeze ray wasn't the only invention of Rick's that is connected to freezing. He also created a time freezer, which in my opinion is one of the most overpowered abilities of his. I mean, imagine if you were getting too stressed at work or you wanted a few more hours in bed or you wanted to stroll around town without any crowds, you could just freeze time. And Rick's time freezing device doesn't come with any nasty side effects like the one Christopher Walken gives to Adam Sandler in the movie Click. It doesn't start skipping everything you've ever skipped before, and it wasn't created by the Angel of Death, and it doesn't have a weird DVD menu either. Well, there is one side effect of ripping open the space-time continuing, but that only happens if you leave time frozen for too long, so I think most of us would be good. Rick's inventions affect not only time, but the overall intelligence of beings too. For example, in the second episode, Rick created the cognition amplifier to make Snuffles smart, as demanded by Jerry. Initially, the amplifier had 1 battery installed despite having the capacity to fit 4 batteries. When Snuffles discovered that his cognition amplifier had only 1 battery, he installed 3 more batteries, which made the amplifier much more effective. After that episode, it became Snuffles' trademark, and we have never seen it without it. This wouldn't be the first time we saw him doing something like that. When the Smith family was too wrapped up in an argument over the breakfast table to pass Rick the butter, he put together a little robot to travel across the table, grab the butter, and bring it back to him. On paper, it might not seem like a robot whose sole purpose is to pass butter is all that impressive, but you have to bear in mind that the robot became sentient, grappled with the soul-crushing philosophical revelation that there was no deeper meaning to its life than passing butter to people, and it only took Rick a few short seconds to whip it up. This legendary character made its comeback in the full meta Jack Rick episode, Rick having agreed to use him for multiple purposes, reactivated by Rick in order to free Red Khan from his cell. On asking Rick, "What is my purpose?" again, in response, Rick tells it to pull the lever when he tells him to. Moments after learning this, the robot responds, "You've got to be kidding me," before nonetheless pulling the lever when Rick indicates for him to do so. He is one of my favorite characters, and I really hope we'll see him again. One of my favorite devices that was used by Rick was the Dream Inceptor. Rick explains that you place it into someone's ear while they're asleep, and then you can enter their dreams. In order to return from the dreamer must be woken up, typically by dream death, which seemingly does not affect them in the real world. It is assumed that the death in dream resulting in death in real life only occurs if you are not the dreamer, but are merely incepting inside of someone else's. The Dream Inceptor produces a high-pitched whine when activated, similar to the sound an older camera flash would make as it charged. If it is used inside a dream, the effects of time will become 100 times slower in the next dream, although it is unclear whether each subsequent dream will be a power of 10-time decrease or a fixed 100x multiplier. Second episode was the only time when we saw that invention in action, and I'm kinda surprised that it never made its comeback. However, it played its role well, and I don't think it would be the best idea to make an entire episode on it again. In the Anatomy Park episode, we are introduced to the Shrink Ray, which was a complex device that could shrink a human down to microscopic size. Rick used this to shrink Morty so he could enter Ruben's body and save Dr. Xenon Bloom, who was having difficulty with problems in Anatomy Park, located inside Ruben. Its counterpart, a growth/enlarge ray, is located inside of Ruben in the colon, and there is an additional enlarge ray on Rick's spaceship. This wasn't the only invention that could affect someone's size. Rick also owns Morphizer Z, a machine that not only entertains the toxic imagination of a high schooler's body image issues, it can also drastically shift the size, shape, and structure of anything at the press of a button. It also doesn't help that such a drastic effect is felt to a constant laser beam that doesn't really show any signs of stopping or a timer. It just keeps going, like a faucet. Poorly or lazily used, its effect on one person could wreak havoc among a small community. What would happen if someone trips and this thing hits a school bus or passing marathon? Dubious situations, but this is a comedy, and it certainly doesn't mind mass turmoil. Rick's inventions were always a big target for his enemies. However, we didn't realize that up until the 4th episode of the first season. In that episode, it is revealed that dark matter is a form of matter that has been unsolved by scientists. Rick knows the formula on how to create concentrated dark matter as a fuel source to enable faster space travel, and the formula is a secret that the Zagarians have long sought to steal from him. However, in that episode, he fooled the Zagarians into believing that the formula included water and cesium. When they attempted to follow his fake recipe, Rick had escaped and the Zagarians had blown themselves up. Another invention which I really wish existed in real life is mind blowers. Imagine being able to visit any memory of yours whenever you want. But not gonna lie, it looks like a double-edged sword too, because I feel like if I kept revisiting my good memories over and over, they wouldn't be that special to me anymore. And it might make a person go insane, but overall this device was very cool to see and I really enjoyed looking at it every time it appeared. There were so many more inventions introduced in the series, and I haven't even mentioned any inventions that were introduced in the comics, since I plan on doing a separate video on that. But these were the inventions that piqued my interest the most. Which one of them is your favorite? Let me know in the comments. Lonnie Brooks out. Bye.